Mwajuma knelt on the cold tile floor behind the shining aisles of a luxury store in Nairobi, her tears falling silently onto a child's torn shoe clutched in her hands. No one stopped. No one asked. A supervisor's voice cut through the hallway, sharp and cruel, ordering her to clean herself up before customers noticed. But Mwajuma didn't move. Her lips trembled as she whispered something no one was meant to hear. Something about her son and men who were coming for him. In the shadows, a quiet stranger stood, watching his expression darkening as he realized this was no ordinary suffering.
Before we continue, tell me where are you watching from and what time is it there right now? And if stories like this move, you don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what happens next.
Mwajuma had learned long ago how to cry without making a sound. It was a skill she never wanted, but life in Nairobi had taught her that tears when seen often brought more trouble than comfort. So she kept them quiet, hidden behind lowered eyes, swallowed between breaths, buried beneath the endless rhythm of work that never seemed to end. She was 32 years old, though the weight she carried made her look older. Her face, once soft and full, had thinned into sharp lines shaped by worry and sleepless nights. Her hands, rough from chemicals and constant scrubbing, told their own story of a woman who had been working long before dawn and long after dusk every single day. Mwajuma had not always lived like this. She came from a small coastal village near Kilifi, where the air smelled of salt and palm trees and evenings were filled with the distant sound of waves. Back there, life had been simple, even when it was hard. She had married young to a man named Juma Mwinyi, a quiet but determined man who believed that one day they would build something better. Juma had been a construction worker, strong, patient, and proud of the work he did. When the opportunity came to move to Nairobi, he took it without hesitation. The city is not kind, people had warned him. But he had smiled and said, "Kindness is something we carry, not something we wait for." For a while it seemed like he was right. They rented a single-room home in a crowded neighborhood, but it was theirs. When their son, Baraka, was born, the small space felt like a palace. Juma worked long hours and Mwajuma sold cooked food by the roadside. They were not rich, but they were together. That was enough. Until the day everything broke. The accident happened at a construction site, owned by a subcontractor Mwajuma had never even heard of. A scaffolding collapse, faulty materials, too many workers crowded into unsafe conditions. Juma fell from the 3rd level. He didn't die immediately. Mwajuma still remembered the hospital room, the smell of antiseptic, the beeping machines, the way his hand felt colder each hour she held it. He had tried to speak, but his voice had been too weak. She leaned close, catching only fragments. "Take care of Baraka. I'm sorry." And then silence. After that, everything became a blur of forms, signatures, promises. They told her there would be compensation. They told her not to worry. They told her to be patient. Weeks passed, then months. Nothing came. Instead, bills came. Hospital bills, burial costs, rent, food, medicine for Baraka, who had begun limping after a fall that never healed properly. The little savings they had disappeared faster than she could count. That was when Mwajuma took the job at the store. It was one of the largest retail chains in Nairobi, known for its polished floors, imported goods, and wealthy customers who barely glanced at the workers who kept everything running. Mwajuma had started as a part-time cleaner but quickly found herself pulled into full-time shifts without full-time pay. At first, she didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. But then, the deductions began. Small amounts at first, unexplained cuts from her already small salary. When she asked, she was told it was for staff welfare, then for uniform maintenance, then for emergency fund contributions. Yet whenever she needed help, there was nothing. No support, no explanation. Just silence. Mwajuma had made a mistake one day. She had asked too many questions. That was when things changed. Her shifts became longer. Her tasks became harder. Her name began appearing on lists: extra cleaning, late-night inventory, weekend duties. Sometimes she worked 16 hours without rest. Other workers noticed, but no one spoke. In that place, silence was survival. Still, Mwajuma endured. Because of Baraka. Baraka was 7 years old, small for his age, with wide, observant eyes that seemed to understand more than a child should. He rarely complained, even when his leg hurt so badly that he struggled to walk. "Mama, I'm okay," he would say, even when he clearly wasn't. Mwajuma knew he needed proper treatment. The local clinic had told her as much. Without it, his condition could become permanent. But treatment required money she didn't have. That was when she made the second mistake. She borrowed money. The man was introduced to her through someone connected to the store's suppliers. His name was Otieno Karanja. He spoke softly, smiled easily, and promised quick help without complicated paperwork. "You just need time," he had told her, "and I will give you that." At the time, it felt like hope. Now it felt like a trap. The interest grew faster than she could pay. Each month, the amount doubled in ways she didn't understand. When she tried to ask questions, the tone of the conversations changed. Less friendly, more demanding. Then came the visits. First polite reminders, then warnings, then threats, and now something worse. Back in the store's dim service corridor, Mwajuma slowly rose to her feet after the supervisor's voice faded away. Her eyes were red, but her face had already begun to settle back into that familiar mask, calm, quiet, invisible. She picked up her mop. She moved as if nothing had happened, but her hands were trembling. From a distance, the man who had been watching her shifted slightly. He wore a simple uniform, the kind used by third-party delivery workers, faded, unremarkable, easy to ignore. But there was nothing unremarkable about the way he observed the world around him. His name was Daniel Adeyemi, and he did not belong there, at least not in the way anyone assumed. Daniel was the CEO of the very chain Mwajuma, worked for a man known in boardrooms, in newspapers, in business circles across multiple countries. But here inside his own store, he was just another invisible figure, moving through the background. He had chosen to come like this, quietly, unannounced. Because of a report. It had arrived anonymously, just a short message, buried among dozens of others. It spoke of exploitation, missing funds, and something about workers being handled when they spoke too much. At first it sounded like exaggeration, but something about it stayed with him. So he came. And now, standing in that narrow corridor, watching Mwajuma wipe the floor with hands that could barely stay steady, he felt something shift deep inside him. This was not just poor management. This was something darker, something organized, something deliberate. His eyes followed her movements carefully. Then he saw it, a faint mark on her wrist. Not dirt, not from work, a bruise, partially hidden but unmistakable. Mwajuma noticed his gaze for a brief second, and quickly adjusted her sleeve, turning away as if nothing was there. That small action said everything. Daniel didn't speak. Not yet. But in that moment he understood one thing clearly. Whatever Mwajuma had whispered through her tears, whatever she was afraid of, it was not just about money anymore. And whatever was happening inside his store, it had already gone too far. Daniel did not leave the store that day. He moved through it slowly, deliberately blending into the background with the quiet precision of someone who had learned how to observe without being seen. The uniform he wore helped no one paid attention to delivery workers. They passed through doors others could not, heard conversations not meant for them, and were rarely remembered afterward. It was the perfect disguise. From the polished entrance to the gleaming aisles filled with imported goods, everything about the store reflected wealth and order. Customers walked freely, laughing, selecting items without ever thinking about the hands that stocked shelves, cleaned floors, and carried boxes through hidden corridors. But behind the glass displays and soft lighting, there was another world. Daniel saw it clearly now. He began in the stockroom, where the air was warmer and heavier. Workers moved quickly, avoiding eye contact. Their conversations short and guarded. No one lingered. No one laughed. There was tension in the way they worked, like people who had learned that being noticed could be dangerous. Daniel pretended to sort packages, listening. "Just keep your head down," one worker muttered to another. "I know," the second replied quietly. "I saw what happened to her. They didn't say her name. They didn't need to." Daniel already knew. Mwajuma. As the hours passed, he built a picture piece by piece. Schedules were not fixed. They were changed at the last minute, often to punish certain workers. Overtime was common but rarely recorded. Breaks were shortened or removed entirely under the excuse of high demand. But what struck Daniel the most was the fear. It wasn't just stress. It was fear of something specific, something personal. Later in the afternoon, Daniel made his way toward the administrative corridor, a section of the store that customers never saw. The floors here were quieter, the lighting slightly dimmer, the doors marked with labels that spoke of authority, management, accounts, security. He slowed his steps as he approached the office of the branch manager, Madame Njeri Wambui. Her reputation, even from the fragments Daniel had gathered, was clear. Efficient, disciplined, respected by upper management, feared by everyone else. The office door was slightly open. Daniel positioned himself near a stack of supply crates, appearing to check inventory, while his ears focused on the voices inside. "I don't want excuses," and Jerry's voice snapped sharp and controlled. "If the numbers don't balance by tomorrow, I will assume someone is stealing." A second voice responded, male, uneasy. "Madam, we've already adjusted the figures twice. If we push it further, it will start showing." "Then make it not show," she interrupted coldly. "Is that not what you are paid for?" There was a brief silence. Daniel could almost feel the tension in the room. Then Njeri spoke again, her tone lower now. "And that woman, Mwajuma." Daniel's grip tightened slightly on the clipboard he was holding. "She has been asking questions again," Njeri continued. "I warned her once. I will not do it again." The man hesitated. "She's just a cleaner, madam. Maybe she's just desperate." "That is exactly the problem," Njeri cut in. "Desperate people talk, and when they talk, they create problems." A pause, then footsteps. Daniel shifted his position slightly, pretending to move a box just as the office door opened wider. Njeri stepped out. She was impeccably dressed, her posture straight, her expression composed in a way that suggested control rather than calm. Her eyes scanned the corridor briefly, before settling on Daniel for a fraction of a second. It wasn't suspicion, just habit. Then she turned to the security guard standing a few meters away. "Keep an eye on her," she said quietly, though not quietly enough. "If she talks again." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The guard nodded once. Understood. Daniel lowered his gaze, continuing his act as if he had heard nothing. But inside, something had shifted again. This was no longer a suspicion. This was confirmation. Mwajuma was being watched, targeted. And whatever she knew, it was dangerous enough to make management nervous. As the evening approached, the store grew busier. Customers filled the aisles, their voices rising, blending with music and the soft hum of air conditioning. On the surface, everything looked normal. But Daniel had already seen too much. He moved back toward the main floor. That was when he saw her again. Mwajuma was near the cleaning station, wringing out a mop with slow mechanical movements. Her face was calm, almost expressionless, but her eyes were distant, as if her thoughts were somewhere far beyond the walls of the store. For a moment, Daniel hesitated. Then he walked closer. Not as a CEO, not as someone with power, just as another worker. "You've been here since morning," he said quietly, his tone casual. Mwajuma looked up surprised. She studied him briefly, trying to place him. Then, she shook her head slightly. "There is always more work," she replied softly. Her voice carried no complaint, only fact. Daniel nodded. He glanced at the bucket, then back at her. "Do they ever let you rest?" A faint, almost invisible smile touched her lips. "Rest is for people who can afford it." There was no bitterness in her tone, just truth. Daniel felt the weight of those words more than he expected. He had heard statements like that before, in reports, in interviews, in carefully structured discussions about labor conditions. But hearing it here, spoken so simply, so quietly, it felt different, more real, more immediate. He looked at her again, noticing the way she avoided meeting his eyes for too long, the way her shoulders remained slightly tense, even when she stood still, the way she listened to everything around her, as if she expected something to happen at any moment. "You should be careful," Daniel said after a brief pause. Mwajuma stiffened, only slightly, but enough. Her fingers tightened around the mop handle. "I don't understand," she said carefully. Daniel lowered his voice. "They're watching you." For a second, her composure cracked. Just a second. Her eyes flickered, fear, recognition, something deeper. Then it was gone. She shook her head quickly. "No," she whispered. "It's nothing," but her voice betrayed her. Daniel didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, he reached for a nearby cloth, pretending to help wipe down a surface. Silence settled between them. But it wasn't empty. It was heavy, filled with unspoken things. After a moment, Mwajuma spoke again. "You should not involve yourself," she said quietly, not looking at him. "People who try to help, they become part of the problem." Daniel glanced at her. "Is that what happened to you?" She didn't answer immediately. Her hands moved again, slower now, more deliberate. Finally, she spoke. "I asked questions," she said simply. "That is all." Daniel nodded slightly, but inside he knew it was not all, not even close. Because questions alone did not create this level of fear. Questions alone did not lead to bruises, or threats, or whispers about sons being taken. As the noise of the store grew louder around them, Daniel made a quiet decision. He would not leave, not until he understood everything, and not until whatever was happening here was brought into the light. Because now it was no longer just an investigation. It was personal, and as he watched Mwajuma walk away, her small figure disappearing into the crowd of workers and customers who would never truly see her, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever she was hiding, whatever she was protecting, it was bigger than anyone in that building wanted it to be. And if Nigeri's warning was any indication, time was running out. That night when Mwajuma finally left the store, the city had already changed its face. Nairobi at night was not the same place that customers saw during the day. The bright glass buildings dimmed into shadows. The polished streets gave way to quieter roads, and the noise softened into something more uncertain, something that carried both life and danger in equal measure. Mwajuma walked quickly, her worn sandals scraping lightly against the pavement. Her body ached from hours of standing, bending, lifting, scrubbing. But the pain in her muscles was not what made her steps urgent. It was fear. She kept glancing behind her, not dramatically, not enough to draw attention, but just enough to make sure no one was following too closely. Because lately, someone always was. The path to her home was not long, but it felt longer each day. She passed dimly lit kiosks, a closed barber shop, a group of young men gathered under a flickering streetlight. Their laughter was loud, careless, but Mwajuma lowered her eyes and walked faster, unwilling to risk even a glance. She turned into a narrower street. then another, until she reached the building she called home. It was old, with cracked walls and a rusted gate that never fully closed. The staircase smelled faintly of damp concrete and cooking oil. Somewhere above, a baby was crying. Somewhere below, a radio played softly. Normal sounds, ordinary life. But tonight, something felt wrong. Mwajuma slowed. Her hand tightened around the small cloth bag she carried. The corridor outside her room was darker than usual. The single bulb overhead had gone out again, leaving only faint light from the street filtering through the broken window at the far end. She took a step forward, then another, and then she saw them. 2 figures standing near her door. Still, waiting, her breath caught. For a moment she considered turning back, walking away, pretending she had come to the wrong place. But she knew better. They had already seen her. Mwajuma. The voice was calm. Too calm. She stopped where she was, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure they could hear it. "Yes," she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. The men stepped forward slightly, just enough for their faces to become visible in the dim light. She recognized one of them. He had come before. Always polite, always smiling. That smile was gone now. "You are late," he said. "I was working," Mwajuma replied quietly. A brief silence followed. Then, the second man spoke, his tone sharper. "Work does not change what you owe." Mwajuma swallowed. "I have some money," she said quickly. "Not all, but I can." The first man raised a hand, stopping her. "We are not here for small payments anymore." Her stomach dropped. The words she had been trying not to think about now stood in front of her. Real. Unavoidable. "I need more time," she whispered. "You have already taken time," the second man said. "Too much." Mwajuma's mind raced. Baraka. Where was he? "Where is my son?" she asked suddenly, her voice trembling despite her effort to control it. The men exchanged a glance. A small one, but enough. Fear surged through her like cold water. "He is inside," she pressed, taking a step forward. The first man's expression shifted slightly, not into cruelty, but into something worse. Indifference. "He is safe," he said. For now. Mwajuma felt her knees weaken. She reached out, steadying herself against the wall. "Please," she said, her voice breaking now. "He is just a child. He has done nothing." "Then you should have thought about that before taking money you could not return," the second man replied. "I took it to treat him," she said desperately. "He is sick. He needs help, and we gave you help," the man cut in. "Now you must return it." Mwajuma shook her head, tears slipping down her face. "I will pay," she said. "I will find a way. Just don't involve him, please." The first man watched her for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice low. "There are 2 ways this ends." Mwajuma held her breath. "You bring the full amount within 3 days," he continued, "or—" He paused. "Just long enough. We take something of equal value." Mwajuma stared at him, her mind refusing to process what she already understood. "No," she whispered. "No. You can't. We can," the second man said flatly. Silence fell, heavy, crushing. Mwajuma felt something inside her begin to break. Not suddenly, but slowly, like a thread stretched too far. "I have nothing left," she said, her voice barely audible. "You have taken everything." The first man tilted his head slightly. "Not everything." Her breath hitched. In that moment, the truth became clear in a way it never had before. This was never just about money. It was about control, about power, about knowing she had nowhere to go. Mwajuma slid down against the wall, her strength leaving her legs. "I will go to the police," she said weakly, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew how empty they sounded. The men did not react with fear or even concern. Instead, the second man laughed softly. "You can try," he said, "but be careful what you say, and who you say it about." Mwajuma looked up, confusion mixing with terror. "What do you mean?" The first man stepped closer, so close she could see the calm certainty in his eyes. "The people you work for," he said quietly. "The people who manage your store." Her heart stopped. "They already know," he continued. "They are part of this." The world seemed to tilt. Mwajuma shook her head slowly. "No, that's not true." But even as she said it, memories surfaced. The deductions, the threats, the way Madame Najeri had looked at her, the warnings, the silence. "They told us about you," the man added. "They said you were becoming difficult." Mwajuma's chest tightened. Air felt harder to pull in. So now the second man said, stepping back toward the door, "You have 3 days." He reached out, knocking lightly on the door behind him. From inside, a small voice called out. Mama Mwajuma's entire body froze. Baraka. She scrambled to her feet, pushing past the men as they stepped aside, just enough to let her through. Her hands shook as she opened the door. Inside, the small room looked the same as always. Simple, worn, familiar. And there, sitting on the edge of the bed, was Baraka. "Safe. For now, Mama," he said again, his voice soft, confused. Mwajuma rushed to him, pulling him into her arms, holding him so tightly he let out a small gasp. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to convince. "I'm here. I'm here." Behind her, the men remained at the doorway, watching, waiting. 3 days, one of them repeated quietly. Then they left. The door closed, and the silence that followed was louder than anything that had come before. Mwajuma held her son, her tears falling freely, now soaking into his shirt as she rocked him gently. Baraka didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. "Mama, are we in trouble?" he asked softly. Mwajuma closed her eyes. For a moment she couldn't answer, because the truth was worse than anything she had ever imagined. "Yes," she whispered, finally her voice breaking, "but I will fix it." Even as she said it, she didn't know how. Daniel did not sleep that night. He had left the store quietly, just as he had entered it, unnoticed, unremarked, another shadow among many. But once inside his car, once the doors closed and the noise of the city faded into a distant hum, the images refused to leave him. Mwajuma's trembling hands, the bruise on her wrist, the way her voice had tightened when he warned her. And most of all, the fear. Not the ordinary fear of poverty or exhaustion. Something sharper, something immediate. He had seen that kind of fear before, in places where systems had already failed. By the time dawn broke over Nairobi, Daniel had already made several calls. Not as a CEO, not officially, quietly, carefully. The first call went to an old contact, someone who had worked with him years ago, in internal audits before moving into independent investigations. His name was Ibrahim Sadiq, a man known for seeing patterns others missed. "I need you to look into something," Daniel had said, keeping his voice low. What kind of something, Ibrahim asked. The kind that doesn't appear in reports. There had been a pause on the other end. Then Ibrahim replied simply, "Send me what you have." But Daniel didn't have enough yet. Not nearly enough. So he returned to the store. Again in disguise, again invisible. This time he paid closer attention, not just to behavior, but to systems, numbers, records, processes. He started in the staff notice area where schedules and payroll summaries were posted. At first glance, everything looked normal. Figures were printed neatly, totals aligned, signatures present. But Daniel knew better than to trust appearances. He compared names, hours, deductions. Patterns began to emerge. Some workers had consistent, unexplained reductions every month. Others had irregular shifts that never matched their recorded hours. And then there were names that appeared, but didn't belong to anyone he had seen. Ghost workers, or worse, real workers being replaced on paper. He memorized everything. Later, he moved to the maintenance logs. Another layer, another story, repeated payments for repairs that had never been done, equipment listed as service that was visibly broken, contracts signed off by suppliers with familiar names. One name in particular appeared again and again. Otieno Karanja. Daniel's jaw tightened. The same man connected to Mwajuma's debt. The same network. It was no coincidence. It couldn't be. By midday, the picture had grown clearer and darker. This wasn't isolated corruption. It was structured, organized, and deeply rooted. But one question remained. Why Mwajuma? Why target her so aggressively? The answer came later that afternoon. Daniel was in the storage area, again stacking boxes slowly when he heard two voices behind a row of shelves. "She still has copies," one voice whispered. Daniel froze, keeping his back turned. "You're sure?" the other asked. "I saw her take something from her locker last week. Papers. She hides them somewhere." A pause, then a low curse. "This is becoming a problem. Madame Njeri already said we can't let it continue." Daniel's pulse quickened. Copies of what he shifted slightly, just enough to catch a glimpse through a narrow gap between the shelves. Two men stood there, one from accounting, the other from security. "If she reports this outside," the first man continued. "She won't," the second replied confidently. "She's too scared, and if she's not silence." Then the answer came. "Then we make sure she is." Daniel's hands clenched around the box he was holding. That was it. Confirmation. Mwajuma wasn't just a victim. She was a threat. Whatever she had, it mattered, and it connected everything. The stolen funds, the fake contracts, the debts, the intimidation, even her husband's death. Daniel stepped away before they could notice him, his mind racing. He needed to find those documents. But more importantly, he needed to understand how far this network reached. Because if Otieno was involved, and Njeri, and possibly others, then this wasn't just about one store. It was about the entire system. Later that evening, Daniel positioned himself near the loading bay waiting. Mwajuma would pass through there at the end of her shift. When she finally appeared, she looked more exhausted than before. But something else had changed. Her eyes. They were sharper now, more alert, as if the fear had grown into something else, something closer to urgency. Daniel stepped forward. "Mwajuma." She stopped immediately. Her reaction was different this time, not just surprise, but tension. "You shouldn't say my name like that," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "All right," he replied. "Then tell me what I should say." She looked at him carefully, as if weighing something. Then she shook her head. "It's better you don't talk to me," she said. "People notice." "They already do," Daniel replied calmly. That made her pause, just for a moment. Then she looked away. "I don't want trouble for you," she said softly. Daniel took a step closer. "You already have trouble," he said. "The question is, how much worse can it get if no one helps you?" Mwajuma's breath caught. His words struck deeper than she expected, but she didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced around, checking who might be watching. Old habits, survival instincts. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't understand," she said. "Then help me understand." She hesitated, long enough for Daniel to realize this was not just fear. This was a decision. A dangerous one. Finally, she reached into the pocket of her worn uniform and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. She held it tightly for a second. then handed it to him. "Just look," she said. Daniel took it carefully, unfolded it. It was a receipt, but not an ordinary one. His eyes scanned the details quickly. Employee welfare deduction, transferred to an external account, authorized by a signature he recognized. Not from this branch, from headquarters. Daniel's stomach tightened. This was bigger than he thought. Much bigger. He looked up at her. "Where did you get this?" Mwajuma swallowed. "There are more," she said. "Not just this." Daniel's voice lowered. "Where?" She shook her head quickly. "I can't tell you everything," she said. "Not yet. Why not?" Her eyes met his, and for the first time he saw something beyond fear. "Resolve. Because if I'm wrong about you," she said quietly, "then my son will not survive it." The words hit him harder than anything else she had said. Not survive, not suffer, not struggle, not survive. Daniel folded the paper carefully. "I'm not who you think I am," he said. Mwajuma gave a faint, tired smile. "Exactly," she replied. "That's why I have to be careful." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Mwajuma stepped back. "I have to go," she said. Daniel nodded slowly, but before she turned away, he spoke again. "Whatever you're holding on to," he said, his voice steady, "it's already putting you in danger." Mwajuma paused. Then she answered without turning back. "I was already in danger," she said. "This just gave me a reason to fight." And with that, she walked away, leaving Daniel standing alone in the fading light of the loading bay, the small piece of paper still in his hand. As he looked down at it again, one thought became clear. This was no longer an investigation. It was a war, and Mwajuma was at the center of it. The next morning began like every other morning in Mwajuma's life, too early, too quiet, and already heavy before the sun had fully risen. Baraka was still asleep when she woke. His small body lay curled on the thin mattress, one leg slightly bent in a way that never looked comfortable. Even in sleep, his face carried traces of strain, as if his body refused to forget pain even for a few hours. Mwajuma sat beside him for a moment, watching. There were days when she allowed herself to imagine something different. Baraka, running freely, laughing, his steps light and effortless like other children she saw in the streets. But those thoughts never stayed long. Reality always returned. She reached out gently, brushing her fingers against his hair. "Baraka," she whispered softly. He stirred, blinking slowly. "Mama, is it morning already?" he asked, his voice still thick with sleep. "Yes," she said, forcing a small smile. "You have school." He nodded, though his eyes lingered on her face. He was too young to understand everything, but not too young to notice. "You were crying last night," he said quietly. Mwajuma's smile faltered for just a second. "No," she replied gently. "I was just tired." Baraka didn't argue. He simply nodded again, accepting the answer the way children do when they sense something deeper but don't yet know how to ask. "I will be strong today," he said suddenly. Mwajuma blinked. "What do you mean, for you?" he added. "So you don't worry." Her chest tightened. She pulled him into a brief embrace. "You don't have to be strong for me," she whispered. "You just have to be a child." But even as she said it, she knew that was no longer true. Not for him, not for either of them. By the time Mwajuma arrived at the store, the day had already begun to move at its usual pace. Customers came and went. Music played softly. Shelves gleamed under perfect lighting. Nothing looked out of place. But Mwajuma felt it immediately. The difference, the way people looked at her. Not openly, not directly, but long enough to be noticed. The security guard near the entrance watched her a second longer than usual. A cashier stopped talking when she passed. Even the cleaners, her own colleagues, kept a slight distance, their conversations lowering as she approached. It was subtle, but it was there. The warning had spread. She kept her head down, kept moving, because stopping would only make it worse. Daniel noticed it too. From across the floor, he watched the invisible shift surrounding Mwajuma. Isolation, deliberate, systematic. It wasn't just punishment anymore. It was preparation. He moved closer, pretending to rearrange a display shelf nearby. 2 employees stood just a few steps away, speaking in hushed tones. "They said it's happening soon," one murmured. "When I don't know." But Madame Njeri looked serious this morning. Daniel's attention sharpened. "What about the woman?" the second asked quietly. A pause. Then a shrug. "She should have stayed quiet." Daniel's jaw tightened. The situation was accelerating, faster than he had anticipated. He needed to move carefully, but not too slowly, because whatever they were planning, it wasn't days away anymore. It was close. Later that afternoon, Mwajuma was called into the back office. She already knew what it meant. The moment her name was spoken, the air seemed to shift around her again. She wiped her hands slowly on her uniform before walking toward the administrative corridor. Each step felt heavier than the last. Inside, Madame Njeri sat behind her desk, her posture straight, her expression calm but not warm. "Never warm. Mwajuma." She said, her voice measured. Mwajuma stood quietly in front of her. "Yes, madam." Njeri gestured toward a chair. "Sit." Mwajuma hesitated for a fraction of a second, then sat. Her hands rested in her lap, fingers intertwined tightly. There was a folder on the desk, thick, neatly arranged. Njeri opened it slowly. "You have been a difficult employee," she began. Mwajuma said nothing. "You question processes," Njeri continued. "You challenge deductions. You create discomfort." Her tone was not angry. It was controlled, calculated. Mwajuma swallowed. "I only asked for clarification," she said carefully. Njeri's eyes lifted to meet hers. "And now I am giving it to you." She turned the folder slightly. Inside were documents, printed statements, reports. Mwajuma's heart began to pound. "These," Njeri said, tapping the top page, "are records of missing items, cleaning supplies, inventory materials. Small things, but consistent." Mwajuma's breath caught. "I did not." Njeri raised a hand. "You will not interrupt." Silence fell again, thick, heavy. Then Njeri slid a single sheet forward. A statement, typed, formal. "I have prepared something for you," she said. "A simple acknowledgement. You admit to minor misconduct, we process it internally, and this matter ends quietly." Mwajuma stared at the paper. Her name was already printed at the top. Her vision blurred slightly. "I didn't take anything," she whispered. Njeri leaned back slightly in her chair. "I know." The words landed like a blow. Mwajuma looked up, confusion flooding her face. "Then why?" "Because truth," Njeri said calmly, "is not always the most useful thing." Mwajuma's chest tightened. "This protects you," Njeri continued, "and it protects the company." "No," Mwajuma said, shaking her head slowly. "It protects you." For the first time, something flickered in Njeri's expression. Not anger, recognition. "You are smarter than I expected," she said softly. Mwajuma's hands trembled. "I won't sign it," she said. The room went still. Njeri studied her carefully. Then she spoke, her voice lower now. 3 days, she said. Mwajuma's breath stopped. The same words, the same timeline. Her mind raced. "You've spoken to them," she said, barely above a whisper. Njeri didn't deny it. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. "You are in a position," she said, "where resistance is unwise." Mwajuma felt something inside her shift. Not break, Not yet, but strain. What about my son? She asked, her voice shaking despite her effort to steady it. Njeri's gaze didn't change. He is part of your situation, she replied. The words were cold, precise. Mwajuma's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. You would do that? She asked. Njeri held her gaze. I don't do anything, she said. I manage outcomes. Silence. Mwajuma looked down at the paper again. The pen lay beside it, waiting. She could end it here. Sign, walk away. Protect Baraka. But at what cost? Everything she knew, everything she had held on to, the truth. Her hands tightened. Then slowly, she pushed the paper back. I won't lie, she said. Her voice was quiet, but firm. Njeri watched her for a long moment. Then she closed the folder. Very well, she said. Her tone returned to neutral, professional. Then we will proceed differently. Mwajuma stood slowly. Her legs felt unsteady, but she didn't show it. As she turned to leave, Njeri spoke one last time. You should think carefully about your priorities, she said. Mwajuma paused at the door. Then she answered without turning back. I already have. And she walked out. Outside, Daniel was waiting. Not visibly, not obviously, but close enough. When Mwajuma stepped into the corridor, he saw it immediately. Something had changed. Her fear was still there, but beneath it, something else had begun to grow. Not hope, not yet, but resistance. And that was far more dangerous. By the time Mwajuma stepped out of the office, the world felt sharper. Not clearer, just sharper. Every sound seemed louder, every movement more noticeable. The hum of the store, the rolling carts, the distant laughter of customers, it all pressed against her senses like something trying to break through. But she kept walking, step by step, because stopping now would mean thinking, and thinking would mean fear. Daniel watched her from a distance. He didn't approach immediately. He didn't need to. What had just happened inside that office was already written across her face, not in obvious ways, but in the subtle tension of her shoulders, the tight control in her breathing, the way her eyes moved without resting on anything for too long. She had been pushed, cornered, and she had refused. That changed everything. Because people like Njeri did not tolerate refusal. Daniel turned away slowly, his mind already moving ahead. Time was gone. Whatever he had planned to uncover quietly would have to move faster now. And that came with risk. That evening, Daniel did something he had not yet done. He left the store early, not out of retreat, but to expand the battlefield. Within an hour, he was seated in a small, dimly lit office across the city, far from the polished buildings that carried his name. Ibrahim Sadiq sat across from him, leaning back in his chair, eyes fixed on the documents Daniel had brought. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ibrahim exhaled slowly. This is not small, he said. Daniel nodded. I know. Ibrahim tapped the papers lightly. Fake deductions, external transfers, contract layering. He shook his head. This is organized. Someone has been doing this for years. Daniel's gaze hardened. I need names, he said. Ibrahim gave a faint, humorless smile. You already have some. He pointed to a line on one of the documents. Otieno Karanja. Daniel's jaw tightened. He's connected to the store, Daniel said, and to a debt network targeting workers. Ibrahim nodded. Yes, but that's just one layer. He reached for another file, one he had prepared independently. You asked me to look beyond the store, he continued. So I did. He slid the file across the table. Daniel opened it. His eyes moved quickly over the contents. Company registrations, subcontractor chains, payment flows. The pattern was clear and disturbing. These companies, Daniel said slowly. They all link back to the same accounts. Yes, Ibrahim confirmed. And those accounts are protected. Daniel looked up. Protected by who? Ibrahim didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned forward slightly. Tell me something, he said. How far are you willing to go with this? Daniel's expression didn't change. All the way. Ibrahim studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, he said. He tapped a specific section in the file. Follow the approvals. Daniel's eyes shifted. Signatures, authorization codes, internal references, and then a name. Samuel Okonkwo. Daniel went still. That name was not unfamiliar. It shouldn't have been there. Samuel Okonkwo was a regional director, trusted, respected, one of the people Daniel himself had relied on to oversee multiple branches, including the one Mwajuma worked in. That's not possible, Daniel said quietly. Ibrahim didn't react. It is, he replied, and it's consistent. Daniel leaned back, slightly processing. If Samuel was involved, then this wasn't just corruption at the branch level. It was protected, shielded, structured from above. They've been cleaning the numbers before they reach you, Ibrahim continued. Adjusting reports, redirecting audits. Anyone who questions it gets isolated. Or, worse, Mwajuma. Daniel's mind returned to her immediately. Her questions, her punishment, her son. Everything aligned. Can we prove it? Daniel asked. Ibrahim nodded slowly. Yes, but not quickly. Daniel shook his head. We don't have time. Ibrahim's eyes narrowed. Why? Daniel hesitated, then spoke. They've given her 3 days. Ibrahim frowned. 3 days for what? Daniel's voice dropped. To break her. Silence filled the room. Ibrahim sat back again, his expression more serious now. And if she doesn't? Daniel didn't answer immediately, because the answer was already clear. They'll make an example, Ibrahim said quietly. Daniel nodded. Yes. Another pause. Then Ibrahim leaned forward again, this time more focused. Then we change the timeline, he said. Daniel looked at him. How? We don't wait for full exposure, Ibrahim replied. We isolate key points first, enough to stop them from acting freely. Daniel considered it. That won't be enough to bring them down, he said. No, Ibrahim agreed, but it might be enough to protect her. That was all Daniel needed. Back at the store, Mwajuma sat quietly in the staff break room. The room was nearly empty. Just a few chairs, a table with worn edges, a small fridge humming softly in the corner. She held a piece of bread in her hands, but she wasn't eating it. Her mind was somewhere else. 3 days. The number echoed again and again. 3 days to find money she didn't have. 3 days to protect her son. 3 days before everything collapsed. She closed her eyes briefly. Not to rest, but to think. Because for the first time, she wasn't only afraid. She was angry. Not loud anger, not explosive, but something deeper, something quieter. Something that had been building for a long time. They had taken her husband. They had taken her money. They had taken her safety. And now, they wanted her son. A slow breath escaped her. Her fingers tightened around the bread. No, that was where it ended. Later that night, after her shift ended, Mwajuma didn't go home immediately. Instead, she walked in a different direction. Further, deeper into the city, until she reached a small alleyway lined with closed shops and dim lights. At the end of the alley stood a woman, older, calm, waiting. Her name was Zuri. She had been Mwajuma's neighbor once before, moving to a different part of the city, but more importantly, she was someone Mwajuma trusted. You came, Zuri said softly. Mwajuma nodded. I didn't know where else to go. Zuri studied her face, then stepped closer. What happened? Mwajuma hesitated. Then she spoke. Not everything, but enough. The threats, the paper, the 3 days. Zuri listened without interrupting. When Mwajuma finished, silence settled between them. Heavy. Then Zuri spoke. "You should have left earlier," she said gently. Mwajuma shook her head. "And go where she asked. They would still find me." Zuri didn't argue, because she knew it was true. After a moment, Mwajuma reached into her bag. She pulled out a small bundle, wrapped in cloth. Carefully, she held it for a second, then handed it to Zuri. "Keep this," she said. Zuri frowned slightly. "What is it?" "Everything I have," Mwajuma replied. "The papers, the records, proof." Zuri's eyes widened. "You've been keeping this?" Mwajuma nodded. "I didn't know what to do with it," she said. "But I knew I couldn't lose it." Zuri looked down at the bundle, then back at Mwajuma. And now Mwajuma's voice dropped. "Now, if something happens to me..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Zuri's grip tightened around the bundle. "No," she said firmly. "Nothing is going to happen to you." Mwajuma gave a faint, tired smile. "That's not something we get to decide anymore." Zuri stepped closer. "Then we fight," she said. Mwajuma looked at her. For a moment, hope flickered. Small, fragile, but real. Then it faded again. "Not everyone wins that fight," she said quietly. Zuri didn't respond immediately. Instead, she placed a hand on Mwajuma's shoulder. "Maybe," she said, "but some people change the outcome." Mwajuma held her gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. Not because she believed it completely, but because she needed to believe something. As Mwajuma walked away from the alley, the city stretched out before her, dark, uncertain, full of things she could no longer control. But behind her, in Zuri's hands, was something powerful, something dangerous, the truth. And somewhere else in the city, Daniel Adeyemi was preparing to act. 2 different paths, 2 different battles, moving toward the same point, and neither of them knew just how close everything was to breaking. The next day did not begin gently. It arrived with tension already waiting. Mwajuma felt it before she even stepped inside the store. The air was different, thicker, quieter in a way that didn't belong to a busy retail space. Even the guards at the entrance seemed more alert, their eyes scanning faces with a purpose that had nothing to do with security. Something had been decided. She walked in slowly, her back straight, her expression calm. Not because she felt calm, but because she had learned that showing fear only invited more of it. Still, inside her, everything was tightening. 3 days had become 2. Daniel was already there. He had arrived earlier than usual, long before opening hours, moving through the building, with sharper focus than before. What Ibrahim had uncovered the night before had changed everything. Samuel Okonkwo, a name that should have represented trust, now sat at the center of something rotten. Daniel had not confronted him yet, not directly, because men like Samuel did not fall from accusations. They fell from evidence, and Daniel needed more. But the timeline had shifted. Mwajuma no longer had the luxury of waiting, so neither did he. The incident began just before midday. It started small, like most things in that place. A cleaner reported missing supplies, industrial detergent gloves, cleaning cloths, items that disappeared regularly but were rarely questioned. This time, however, it was different. This time there was a name attached, Mwajuma. She was called to the front, not the office, not privately, in front of others. That alone told her everything. As she stepped into the open space near the customer service counter, she could feel eyes turning toward her, some curious, some cautious, some already convinced of her guilt. Madame Najeri stood there, composed as always. Beside her, a small box sat on the counter. opened, inside the missing items. Mwajuma stopped a few steps away. "Do you recognize these?" Njeri asked. Her voice carried just enough to be heard by those nearby. Mwajuma looked at the box, then back at Njeri. "Yes," she said quietly. "They belong to the store." "And do you know how they came to be missing?" Mwajuma hesitated, then shook her head. "No." A brief silence followed. Then Njeri gestured toward one of the security guards. "Open her locker." Mwajuma's breath caught. She turned sharply. "No." But it was already happening. The guard moved quickly, disappearing down the corridor. Moments later, he returned, holding something. More supplies, the same kind, the same brand, the same items. He placed them on the counter, next to the others. The implication was immediate, clear. Mwajuma stared at them, her mind struggling to catch up. "That's not mine," she said, her voice rising slightly. "I didn't take those," and Jerry's expression didn't change. "They were found in your assigned locker," she said calmly. "I didn't put them there," Mwajuma insisted. Her eyes scanned the room, searching, pleading, hoping someone would say something. No one did. The silence was heavier than any accusation. Perhaps Njeri continued. "You would like to explain how they got there?" Mwajuma shook her head, panic beginning to rise. "I don't know," she said. "I swear I don't know." Njeri tilted her head slightly. "Swearing is not evidence." A soft murmur passed through the nearby staff. Not loud, but enough. Mwajuma felt it like a wave pressing against her. "They're lying," she said, her voice trembling now. "Someone put them there." "Who?" Njeri asked. Mwajuma opened her mouth, then stopped, because she knew the answer, but she couldn't say it. "Not here. Not like this." The silence stretched, then Njeri turned to the others. "This is what happens." She said, her tone measured when trust is broken. Mwajuma felt something snap inside her. Not completely, but enough. "I didn't steal anything," she said again, louder this time. Her voice cut through the space. For a moment, everything paused. Then Njeri stepped closer. Just enough to lower her voice. "You are making this harder for yourself," she said quietly. Mwajuma's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Njeri's answer was soft, because she didn't need it to be heard by anyone else. "You had a choice." Mwajuma's breath hitched. "You still do." The message was clear. "Sign the paper, or this continues." Daniel had seen everything, from the edge of the crowd, from behind a row of shelves, every word, every movement, every calculated step. His hands were clenched at his sides, but he didn't move, not yet, because stepping in now without control would ruin everything, and might not even help Mwajuma. But it was getting harder. Watching this, letting it happen, knowing exactly what it was. A setup, a trap, a public breaking. The situation escalated quickly. Mwajuma was told to leave the floor, her duties suspended, her wages frozen pending investigation. The words were formal, but the meaning was clear. She was being cut off, isolated, again. As she walked back toward the staff area, the distance between her and the others felt wider than ever. No one followed. No one spoke. Even those who had once greeted her now avoided her completely. Because now she was marked, and being marked meant danger. That evening, Mwajuma returned home earlier than usual. Her steps were faster, more urgent. Her heart pounded as she reached the building, unlocked the door, stepped inside. Baraka, no answer. Her chest tightened. Baraka, still nothing. Panic surged through her. She rushed inside, scanning the small room. The bed, empty. The corner, empty. The air felt wrong. Too still, too quiet. Her hands began to shake. No, 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 no. She moved quickly, checking every space, every corner. though she knew there were not many places to check. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. Her breath became shallow, fast, her vision blurred. Then a knock, soft, behind her. Mwajuma turned slowly, her entire body tense. The door. She stepped toward it, carefully, opened it. And there stood Zuri, with Baraka beside her, safe, alive. Mwajuma collapsed forward, pulling him into her arms before he could even speak. Baraka! Baraka! Her voice broke completely this time. Zuri stepped inside, closing the door quickly behind them. I found him outside, she said softly. He said someone came looking for you. Mwajuma held her son tighter, too tight, as if letting go would make him disappear again. Baraka clung to her. Mama, I was scared, he whispered. I know, she said, her voice shaking. I know. She looked up at Zuri, fear flooding her eyes again. They're getting closer, she said. Zuri nodded. Yes. Mwajuma's grip tightened. They won't stop, she whispered. No, Zuri replied quietly. They won't. Silence settled again, heavy, unavoidable. Mwajuma closed her eyes briefly. 2 days left, and now, no protection at work, no income, no safety. Everything was collapsing. But somewhere beneath the fear, something else remained. Not hope, not yet, but something that refused to disappear. Because now it wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about her son, and for him. She would not break, not easily. That night sleep did not come, not to Mwajuma, not to Zuri, and certainly not to Daniel Adeyemi. 3 different places in the same city, 3 different battles unfolding at once, but all of them moving toward the same breaking point. Mwajuma sat on the edge of the bed, long after Baraka had fallen asleep. Zuri had insisted on staying the night, not out of comfort, but out of necessity. Neither of them said it directly, but both understood this was no longer a situation Mwajuma could face alone. The room was quiet except for the soft breathing of the child and the distant sounds of the city beyond the cracked window. Mwajuma's hands rested in her lap, still trembling slightly. Her mind replayed everything from the day, the accusations, the box of supplies, the way people had looked at her, and worst of all, the moment she walked into her home and didn't see her son. Even now the memory made her chest tighten. They're speeding things up, Zuri said softly from across the room. Mwajuma nodded slowly. Yes. They're trying to break you before you can do anything. Mwajuma let out a quiet breath. They already think I've done something, she said. At the store. No one will listen to me now. Zuri leaned forward slightly. That's the point, she said. If they destroy your name, then whatever you say later won't matter. Mwajuma closed her eyes briefly. The truth of it settled heavily. They've already decided what I am, she whispered. Zuri didn't respond immediately, because there was no easy answer. Instead, she looked toward the small cloth bundle resting on the table, the one Mwajuma had given her the night before. Then we don't rely on them listening, Zuri said, finally. Mwajuma opened her eyes. What do you mean? Zuri walked over to the table and picked up the bundle. We make sure the truth doesn't depend on them, she said. Mwajuma watched her carefully. There was something different in Zuri's tone. Not just concern, not just fear. Determination. Those papers, Zuri continued, unwrapping the cloth slowly. They're not just evidence, they're protection. Mwajuma frowned slightly. They didn't protect me, she said quietly. Not yet, Zuri replied, because you've been holding them alone. She spread the contents across the table. Receipts, copies of payroll slips, fragments of documents tied to Juma's accident. Notes Mwajuma had written herself, dates, names, amounts, small things, but together They formed a pattern. Zuri studied them closely, then looked back at Mwajuma. "Do you know what this is?" she asked. Mwajuma shook her head. "It's a story," Zuri said, "and stories like this, they don't stay hidden forever." Mwajuma's gaze dropped. "People disappear for less," she said. Zuri didn't deny it. Instead, she asked a different question. "And what happens if you do nothing?" Mwajuma didn't answer, because she already knew. Baraka, that was the answer. Zuri nodded slowly. "Then we don't do nothing," she said. Across the city, Daniel sat alone in his office. Not the official one. Not the polished space filled with glass and quiet assistants. This was a smaller office. Private, unmarked. The kind of place where decisions could be made without witnesses. The receipt Mwajuma had given him lay on the desk in front of him. He had studied it, again and again, every detail, every signature, every connection, and now combined with what Ibrahim had uncovered. The truth was undeniable. Samuel Okonkwo, a man Daniel had trusted, a man who had sat across from him in meetings spoken about growth, efficiency, expansion, all the right words, all the right numbers, and behind it all, this. Daniel leaned back slowly, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Betrayal in business was not new to him, but this was different, because this wasn't just about money. It was about people, people like Mwajuma, people who had no protection, no voice, no way to fight back. And his company, his system had become the place where they were being crushed. That thought sat heavier than anything else. A quiet knock broke the silence. "Ibrahim," Daniel said. The door opened. Ibrahim stepped in, holding another file. "I have more," he said. Daniel sat forward immediately. "Show me." Ibrahim placed the file on the desk and opened it. "These are internal approvals," he said, cross-checked with external transfers. Daniel scanned the pages, then stopped. A familiar pattern, repeated, consistent. "It all goes through," Samuel, Daniel said. "Yes," Ibrahim confirmed, "but he's careful. He doesn't sign everything directly. He uses layers." Daniel nodded slowly. "Can we tie him to Otieno?" Ibrahim turned a page. "There," he said. Daniel's eyes followed. A contract, signed, authorized, and the names connected. Daniel exhaled slowly. "This is enough to confront him," he said. Ibrahim shook his head. "Not yet." Daniel frowned. "It proves involvement." "Yes," Ibrahim agreed, "but not the full network. If you confront him now, he will deny it and erase the rest." Daniel leaned back again. Frustration flickered across his face. "We don't have time to build a perfect case," he said. "I know," Ibrahim replied. "But we need enough to stop them from acting." Daniel's gaze hardened. "They're already acting." Silence fell. Then Daniel spoke again. "Baraka," he said quietly. Ibrahim looked at him. "The boy," Daniel continued. "They're using him." Ibrahim's expression shifted slightly. "That changes things," he said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "It does." Another pause. Then Ibrahim leaned forward. "Then we protect the target first," he said, "and expose the system second." Daniel nodded slowly. For the first time since the conversation began. There was clarity. Back in Mwajuma's small room, the night stretched on. Zuri had finished organizing the documents, carefully placing them back into the cloth bundle. "We should make copies," she said. Mwajuma shook her head immediately. "It's too risky." Zuri didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. "Keeping everything in one place is also risky," she said. Mwajuma looked at her, then at the bundle, then toward Baraka, sleeping quietly. Every decision now felt like a risk. Every choice carried consequences. "What if they come again?" Mwajuma asked softly. Zuri's answer came without hesitation. "Then they won't find everything. Mwajuma hesitated, then nodded slowly. Tomorrow, she said. We'll find a way tomorrow. Zuri accepted that, for now, as the first light of morning began to creep through the window. Mwajuma finally lay down beside her son. Her body was exhausted, but her mind remained awake, turning, thinking, planning, for the first time since all of this began. She wasn't just reacting, she was preparing, and somewhere in the city Daniel was doing the same. Two separate plans, two separate paths, moving toward the same truth, but neither of them knew that someone else was already watching, waiting, and preparing to move first. Morning came too quickly. For Mwajuma, it felt as though she had only just closed her eyes when the light slipped through the cracked window and touched the edge of the room. Baraka stirred beside her, his small body shifting slightly, searching for comfort, even in sleep. She did not want to wake him. Not yet, because every moment he remained asleep was a moment he did not have to feel the weight of what was happening around them. Mwajuma sat up slowly, careful not to disturb him, and glanced across the room. Zuri was already awake, sitting at the small table, watching, not in fear, but in thought. "You didn't sleep," Mwajuma said quietly. Zuri gave a faint smile. "Neither did you." Mwajuma didn't deny it. Instead, she stood and walked toward her, her movements slower than usual. "What do we do today?" she asked. It wasn't a question filled with hope. It was a question of survival. Zuri leaned back slightly, folding her arms. "We split the risk," she said. Mwajuma frowned. "What do you mean?" Zuri gestured toward the cloth bundle. "We don't keep everything together anymore. We make copies, we separate them. If they take one, they don't take everything." Mwajuma hesitated. The idea made sense, but the fear remained. "What if someone sees us?" she asked. Zuri shrugged slightly. "Then we choose where we go, carefully." Mwajuma looked toward Baraka again. Her mind immediately went to him. Always him. "And Baraka?" she asked. Zuri's expression softened. "He stays with someone we trust," she said. "Just for today." Mwajuma shook her head quickly. "No," she said. "I don't want him out of my sight." Zuri leaned forward slightly. "That's exactly why he's in danger," she said gently. The words landed hard. Mwajuma's chest tightened. She knew it was true. But accepting it felt like letting go of the only thing keeping her steady. "I can't lose him," she whispered. Zuri reached out, placing a hand over hers. "You're trying not to," she said. "That's why we do this properly." Silence followed, then slowly. Mwajuma nodded. Across the city, Daniel was already inside the headquarters building. This time not in disguise, this time as himself. The shift was immediate. People noticed. They always did. Assistants straightened. Managers adjusted their posture. Conversations softened as he passed. But Daniel did not acknowledge any of it. He moved directly toward the executive floor, toward one office in particular. Samuel Okonkwo. He didn't knock. He opened the door. Samuel looked up from his desk, surprised, but only for a fraction of a second. Then he smiled. "Daniel," he said smoothly. "I wasn't expecting you today." Daniel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I didn't announce it," he replied. Samuel leaned back slightly in his chair. Clearly, he said a hint of amusement in his voice. "What brings you here?" Daniel walked forward slowly, deliberately. "I've been reviewing some branch operations," he said. Samuel nodded. "As you should," he replied. "Everything is running well." Daniel stopped in front of the desk. "Is it?" A brief pause. Samuel's smile didn't fade, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Of course," he said. "If there were issues, I would have addressed them." Daniel placed a file on the desk. Not aggressively, not dramatically. "Just there." "Then explain this," he said. Samuel glanced down, opened the file. His eyes moved quickly over the pages. For a moment, there was no reaction. Then he closed it. Calmly, "These are incomplete," he said. Daniel's expression didn't change. "Incomplete," he repeated. Samuel nodded. "Without full context, numbers can be misleading," he said. "You know that." Daniel leaned slightly forward. "And what context makes this acceptable?" he asked. Samuel held his gaze. "Operational adjustments," he replied. "Sometimes we have to make decisions that don't look clean on paper." Daniel's jaw tightened. "And employee deductions," he pressed. "Debt connections, external transfers." Samuel exhaled slowly. "Daniel," he said, his tone shifting slightly, "you're looking at this too narrowly." Daniel straightened. "Then widen it for me," he said. Samuel stood, slowly, matching Daniel's height, his presence. "This company operates in difficult environments," he said. "We deal with people who are not always stable. Sometimes control is necessary." Daniel's eyes hardened. "Control," he repeated. Samuel nodded. "Yes," he said. "Because without it, everything collapses." Daniel took a step closer. "And children?" he asked quietly. "Is that part of your control?" For the first time, Samuel hesitated, only slightly, but it was there. "I don't know what you're referring to," he said. Daniel held his gaze. "You will," he replied. Silence filled the room, heavy, uncomfortable. Then Samuel spoke again. "You're making a mistake," he said. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Am I?" Samuel stepped closer, lowered his voice. "You think this is about one branch," he said. "One manager, one situation." He shook his head slowly. "It's not." Daniel didn't respond. He didn't need to. Because he already knew. Samuel continued. "If you push this the wrong way," he said, "you won't just expose problems." His voice dropped further. "You'll damage everything." Daniel studied him for a long moment, then asked one simple question. "At what cost?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. Then, "At the cost of survival," he said. Daniel nodded slowly, as if considering it. Then he picked up the file, turned, and walked toward the door. "Then we define survival differently," he said. And he left. Back in the streets of Nairobi, Mwajuma walked beside Zuri, her grip tight around the small bag she carried. Inside it, everything. They moved quickly, avoiding crowded areas, choosing quieter paths. Every shadow felt heavier, every sound sharper, but they kept going, because stopping was no longer an option. They reached a small print shop tucked between two buildings, old, worn, but functional. Zuri stepped inside first. Mwajuma followed. The man behind the counter looked up briefly, then nodded. "What do you need?" he asked. "Copies," Zuri replied. Mwajuma hesitated, then slowly reached into her bag, pulled out the documents. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the counter. The man took them without question, started the machine. The sound filled the small space, loud, rhythmic, exposing. Mwajuma's eyes moved constantly, watching, waiting. And then she saw something through the glass window. Outside, a car, parked, engine running, two men inside, watching. Her breath caught. "Zuri," she whispered. Zuri followed her gaze. Her expression changed instantly. "They found us," she said quietly. The machine kept running. The copies continued printing, but time was gone. For a split second, everything froze. The machine kept humming, the copies sliding out one by one with a steady mechanical rhythm, but inside Mwajuma's chest, time had stopped completely. The car outside did not move. The men inside did not step out. They simply watched, waiting. That was what made it worse. Not rushing, not forcing, just knowing. Zuri reacted first. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Don't panic. Mwajuma's hands tightened around the edge of the counter. They're here for us, she said, her voice barely audible. Zuri nodded once. Yes. Mwajuma swallowed hard. What do we do? Zuri's eyes moved quickly across the small shop measuring distance exits people. There was only one door, the front. No back exit, no place to hide. The man at the counter was still feeding papers into the machine, unaware of the tension building behind him. The copies were almost done. Zuri leaned closer. When I say move, she whispered. You don't stop. You don't look back. You run. Mwajuma shook her head immediately. No, she said. We can't leave the papers. Zuri grabbed her wrist. Firm. You listen to me, she said quietly, but with force. Papers don't matter if they take you. Mwajuma's breath became shallow, but they're already watching Zuri cut in. That means they don't want noise. They want control. If we move fast, we break that. Mwajuma looked at her. Fear, conflict, but also trust. The machine beeped softly. Finished. The last copy slid out. Zuri didn't hesitate. She grabbed the stack originals and copies, shoved them quickly back into the cloth bundle, and tied it tight. Then she turned to Mwajuma. Now, they moved. Fast. Not running at first, just walking, controlled, toward the door. Mwajuma could feel her heartbeat in her throat, in her ears, in her hands. Every step felt louder than it should. The bell above the shop door rang as they stepped outside. The sound cut through the silence like a signal. The men in the car shifted immediately. Doors opened. That was all it took, Run Zuri said. And they did. The street blurred around them. People turned. Voices rose. But Mwajuma didn't see anything clearly. All she felt was movement. Forward, faster. Her breath burned. Her legs screamed. But she didn't stop. Behind them, footsteps followed. Closer, closer. Left, Zuri shouted. They turned sharply into a narrow alley. The space tightened around them, walls closing in, air growing heavier. Mwajuma stumbled slightly. Zuri grabbed her arm, pulling her forward. Keep moving. The footsteps echoed behind them now. Louder, closer, they were gaining. Mwajuma's mind raced. Baraka. That was all she could think of. If they caught her, if they took the papers, if everything ended here. No. She pushed harder, ignoring the pain, ignoring the fear, because stopping was not an option, not anymore. At the end of the alley, the path split. Two directions. Zuri stopped for a fraction of a second, then made a decision. You go right, she said quickly. Mwajuma froze. What, I'll go left, Zuri continued. They'll follow me. No, Mwajuma said immediately. We stay together. Listen to me, Zuri snapped. Mwajuma went still. Zuri stepped closer, her grip tight on Mwajuma's shoulders. They want you, she said. Not me. If we split, you have a chance. Mwajuma shook her head, tears already forming. I can't. You can, Zuri said firmly. For Baraka, that name, that was enough. Mwajuma's resistance broke, not because she wanted to leave, but because she had no choice. Zuri pressed the bundle into her hands. Take it, she said. Don't lose it. Mwajuma hesitated, then nodded. Once. Zuri gave her a final look, then turned and ran left, without hesitation, without looking back. Mwajuma stood there for 1 second. Just one. Then she turned and ran right. Behind her, voices rose. Footsteps split. One followed Zuri, one followed her. Her heart dropped. They didn't all take the bait. Mwajuma pushed forward, her breath ragged now, her vision narrowing. The alley opened into a wider street. More people, more noise, more movement. She blended into it, or tried to. But the footsteps behind her didn't slow. They were still there, still coming. Move! The voice came from nowhere, strong, Urgent. Mwajuma turned and saw him. Daniel, no disguise, no uniform, just himself. Standing beside a car, door open. "Get in," he shouted. Mwajuma didn't think. She ran, straight toward him. The man behind her shouted. Louder now, closer, but she didn't stop. Daniel reached out, grabbed her arm, pulled her into the car, and slammed the door. "Go!" he shouted to the driver. The car surged forward, tires screeching, the city blurring past them. Mwajuma's chest heaved as she tried to breathe. Her hands still clutched the bundle tightly. Her entire body trembled. Daniel turned to her. "You're safe," he said. But his voice carried something else. Urgency, because even he knew safe was temporary. Mwajuma looked at him. Really looked this time. No disguise, no distance, no misunderstanding. And suddenly everything clicked. "You," she whispered. Daniel didn't interrupt. "You're not," she continued, her voice shaking. "No," he said quietly. "I'm not." Silence filled the car. Heavy, unavoidable. Mwajuma stared at him, her mind racing, her heart still pounding. "You knew," she said. "This whole time." Daniel nodded. "Yes." Her grip tightened around the bundle. "Then why didn't you stop it?" she demanded suddenly. The question came out sharper than she intended, but she didn't take it back, because it mattered. Daniel didn't react defensively. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he answered simply. "Because I didn't know how deep it went." Mwajuma's eyes filled with tears. And now she asked. Daniel held her gaze. "Now I do." Another silence. Then Mwajuma spoke again. "They took him," she said. Daniel's expression changed instantly. "Baraka?" he asked. Mwajuma nodded. "They'll take him if I don't give them what they want." Daniel's jaw tightened. "They won't," he said. Mwajuma shook her head. "You don't understand," she said. "They're connected, everywhere, even inside your company." "I know," Daniel replied. That made her pause. "You know," she repeated. Daniel nodded. "Yes." Mwajuma's breath slowed slightly. Not from calm, but from realization. Then she looked down at the bundle in her hands. "This," she said softly. "This is everything." Daniel glanced at it. "I know." She looked back at him. "If this disappears," she said, her voice breaking, "then nothing changes." Daniel leaned forward slightly. "It won't disappear," he said. His voice was steady, certain. For the first time, Mwajuma felt something shift inside her again. Not fear, not anger, something else, something fragile, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Trust, but only a little. The car sped through the streets, putting distance between them and the danger behind. But even as the city moved past them, the truth remained. This wasn't over, not even close. Because now everything was out in the open, and once that happens, there is no going back. The car did not stop at any of Daniel's official properties. It didn't go to headquarters. It didn't go to his residence. Instead, it turned into a quieter part of the city, far from the polished glass towers and far from the neighborhoods where Mwajuma had spent most of her life trying to survive. The streets here were calmer, less crowded, more controlled. Finally, the car slowed in front of a modest compound surrounded by high walls and a simple metal gate. Not luxurious, not obvious, but secure. Daniel stepped out first, scanning the area quickly, before opening the door for Mwajuma. "We're here," he said. Mwajuma hesitated for a moment. Her grip tightened around the bundle in her hands. Her eyes moved across the compound, calculating, measuring, still unsure. Daniel didn't rush her. "You don't have to trust me completely," he said quietly. "Just enough to stay alive." That was enough. Mwajuma stepped out. Inside, the space was simple but prepared. A small sitting area. 2 rooms, basic furniture, but everything was clean, organized, Safe, for now. Mwajuma sat slowly on the edge of a chair, her body finally beginning to feel the full weight of everything she had just gone through. Her legs ached, her chest still rose and fell unevenly, but her hands never let go of the bundle. Daniel noticed. He didn't ask for it. Not yet. Instead, he gave her space. "Water?" he asked. Mwajuma nodded. He handed her a glass. She took it, her fingers still trembling slightly as she drank. Silence settled between them. Not empty, just heavy. "Then where is my son?" The question came suddenly, sharp, urgent. Daniel met her gaze immediately. "He's safe," he said. Mwajuma's eyes narrowed slightly. "How do you know?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Because I've already moved him." The words hung in the air. Mwajuma froze. What? Daniel stepped closer. "After yesterday, he said I knew they would escalate, so I had someone I trust bring him to a secure location." Mwajuma stood abruptly. "You took him," she demanded, her voice rising. Daniel held his ground. "I protected him." "That's not your decision," she snapped. Her anger surged, now fueled by fear exhaustion, everything she had been holding back. "He's my son, I know," Daniel said calmly. "And that's exactly why I acted." Mwajuma shook her head, pacing now. "You should have told me," she said. "You should have asked, and risked them getting to him first." Daniel interrupted gently. Mwajuma stopped. The words hit hard, because she knew it was true. Still, that didn't make it easier. "Where is he?" she asked again, her voice quieter now but no less intense. Daniel studied her for a moment, then answered. "With someone who used to work for me," he said. "A woman named Mama Halima. She runs a small safe house outside the city. No connections to the company. No connections to Otieno." Mwajuma's breath slowed slightly. Not calm, but less frantic. "Is he scared?" she asked. Daniel's expression softened. "Yes," he said honestly. "But he's not alone." Mwajuma closed her eyes briefly. A tear slipped down her cheek. She wiped it away quickly, not wanting to lose control again. "Can I see him?" she asked. Soon Daniel replied. "But not yet." Mwajuma opened her eyes again. "Why not?" "Because right now Daniel said they're still looking for you. If we move too soon, we lead them straight to him." Mwajuma's shoulders dropped slightly. The fight in her softened. Just a little. Because again, he was right. They sat in silence for a few moments longer. Then Daniel spoke. "Show me what you have." Mwajuma looked down at the bundle in her hands. Her fingers tightened instinctively. For a second, she hesitated. Not because she didn't want to help, but because this was everything she had left. Her protection, her risk, her power, and her danger. Daniel didn't rush her. He simply waited. Finally, Mwajuma unwrapped the cloth slowly, carefully. The papers spread across the small table between them. Daniel leaned forward, his eyes scanning each piece. Receipts, payroll slips, handwritten notes, fragments of reports, and one document that made him stop completely. He picked it up, read it again, slower this time. "This," he said quietly. Mwajuma watched him. "That's from my husband's case," she said. Daniel looked up. His expression had changed. "How did you get this?" he asked. Mwajuma swallowed. "I went back," she said, "to the site. After everything, I asked questions." Daniel's gaze sharpened. "And they gave you this?" "No," she said. A pause. "I took it." Daniel sat back slightly. Processing. The document wasn't just a report. It was a liability record, one that should have triggered compensation, one that should have been processed, but hadn't been. Instead, it had been buried, and now combined with everything else. It formed a link, clear, direct, dangerous. This Connects them, Daniel said quietly. Mwajuma nodded. Yes. Daniel looked at her again. And they? No, you have this. Mwajuma hesitated. Then yes. The room went still, because that changed everything. Again. Daniel stood slowly, walking a few steps away. His mind moved quickly now, faster than before. The pieces were all there. The corruption, the network, the link between the store Otieno and Samuel, and now a direct connection to Juma's death. This wasn't just exploitation. This was systemic abuse, covered, protected, maintained, and Mwajuma. She wasn't just a victim. She was the evidence. Behind him, Mwajuma spoke again. They told me to sign, she said. Daniel turned slightly. A confession, she continued. For theft. Daniel nodded. I know. Mwajuma looked at the papers. If I sign, they stop, she said. Daniel's expression hardened. No, he said. They don't. Mwajuma's eyes lifted to his. They said they would, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer again. They lied, he said. Silence. Mwajuma held his gaze, searching for certainty, for truth. For how long? She asked finally. How long can you protect us? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was complicated. But he didn't lie. Long enough to finish this, he said. Mwajuma studied him, then looked down again. Her voice, when she spoke next, was quieter, more fragile. I'm tired, she said. Not just physically. Everything. Daniel nodded slowly. I know. She let out a small breath. I didn't want to fight, she said. I just wanted to live. Daniel didn't respond. Because there was nothing to say to that. Only something to do. He reached for the papers again. Carefully. We end this, he said. Mwajuma looked up, her eyes still filled with uncertainty, with what she asked. Daniel met her gaze. With the truth. The word hung in the air, heavy, powerful, dangerous, because truth in the wrong place, at the wrong time, could destroy everything. But in the right moment, it could do something else. Mwajuma looked at him for a long time. Then slowly, she nodded. Not because she felt safe, not because she believed everything would be okay, but because there was no other way left, and somewhere deep inside her, past the fear, past the exhaustion, past the pain, something still refused to give up. Outside the compound, the city moved as usual, unaware, unchanged. But inside, everything had shifted. Because now the truth was no longer hidden. It was gathered, prepared, and waiting for the moment it would finally be seen. The night inside the safe house passed without incident. No knocks, no footsteps outside the gate, no sudden movements in the shadows. But that didn't mean safety. It only meant time. And time in this situation was not comfort. It was pressure building quietly before it broke. Daniel woke before sunrise. Not because he had rested, but because his mind refused to stop. The documents Mwajuma had given him lay spread across the table, now reorganized, cross-referenced, and marked with notes written in his precise, controlled handwriting. Every piece connected. Not perfectly, not yet. But enough. Enough to act, enough to force movement, enough to make it impossible for Samuel Okonkwo and the others to quietly erase what they had built. Daniel stood by the window looking out at the still dark sky. Today would not be quiet. Today would not be careful. Today everything would begin to come into the open. Mwajuma woke a few moments later. For a brief second, she didn't remember where she was. Then it returned, all of it. The running, the fear, the papers, Baraka. Her body tensed immediately. She sat up quickly. Baraka, she said, her voice urgent. Daniel turned. He's safe, he said again. Mwajuma exhaled slowly, pressing her hand against her chest as if to steady her heartbeat. I need to see him, she said. Daniel nodded. You will, he replied. today. That was the first thing he had said that sounded like a promise. Mwajuma held onto it. An hour later, they were on the move again. This time not running, not hiding, but still careful. The car moved along quieter roads, avoiding main routes, changing direction more than once before finally heading toward the outskirts of the city. Mwajuma sat in the back seat, her eyes fixed on the window but not really seeing what passed by. Her mind was ahead, already there, with Baraka. Every second felt too slow, every turn too long, until finally, the car stopped. Mama Halima's house was nothing like Mwajuma had imagined. It wasn't large, it wasn't hidden behind high walls. It was simple, modest. A place that looked like it belonged to ordinary life, which Daniel knew made it harder to find. Mwajuma didn't wait for the door to fully open. She stepped out quickly, her breath catching as she moved toward the entrance. Mama Halima, Daniel called. A moment later, the door opened. An older woman stepped out, her presence calm, grounded. Behind her, a small figure. Mwajuma's world narrowed instantly. Baraka. The name left her lips like a prayer. Baraka looked up. For a second he froze. Then Mama. He ran. As fast as his leg allowed, Mwajuma met him halfway, dropping to her knees, pulling him into her arms with a force that carried everything she had been holding back. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her tears said everything. Baraka clung to her tightly. "I thought you weren't coming back," he whispered. Mwajuma shook her head, holding him closer. "I will always come back," she said, even though until this moment she hadn't been sure. Daniel stood a few steps away, watching. He didn't interrupt. He didn't speak, because this moment didn't belong to him. It belonged to them. And it was something neither of them had been guaranteed. After some time, Mama Halima stepped closer. "He was brave," she said, gently. Mwajuma looked up. "Thank you," she said, her voice still unsteady. Mama Halima nodded. "He asked many questions," she added with a faint smile, "but he stayed strong." Mwajuma looked back at Baraka. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she whispered. Baraka shook his head. "For you," he said. Mwajuma closed her eyes briefly. That same phrase. Again, and it broke something inside her, in a way nothing else had. Later, inside the house, the mood shifted. Not completely, but enough. Baraka sat close to Mwajuma, his small hand wrapped around hers as if letting go might make her disappear again. Daniel sat across from them, his posture more formal now, more focused, because the moment they had just shared, as important as it was, didn't change what was coming next. "We don't have much time," he said. Mwajuma looked up, her expression hardened slightly. "I know," she replied. Daniel leaned forward. "I've confirmed everything," he continued. "The corruption, the connections. Samuel Okonkwo is directly involved." Mwajuma nodded slowly. She wasn't surprised. Just tired of being right about the worst things. "What happens now?" she asked. Daniel held her gaze. "We expose it," he said. Simple words, heavy meaning. Mwajuma's grip tightened around Baraka's hand. "They'll come after us," she said. "Yes," Daniel replied. "They already have." Silence. Then Mwajuma spoke again. "What about the others?" she asked. "The workers, people like me." Daniel didn't hesitate. "They'll be protected," he said. Mwajuma studied him carefully, not doubting, but measuring. "Can you guarantee that?" she asked. Daniel paused. "Then no," he said. "Honest, direct." Mwajuma nodded slowly. "At least he didn't pretend. But I can make it harder for them to continue," he added, "and impossible for them to hide." That mattered. More than promises. Mama Halima stepped in quietly. "They've already started asking questions," she said. Daniel looked at her. "Who people in the area?" she replied. "Strangers, moving around, watching." Mwajuma's body tensed again. "They're getting closer," she said. Daniel nodded. Yes. Then he stood. That's why we don't wait anymore, he said. Mwajuma looked up at him. Her fear was still there, but something else stood beside it now. Readiness. What do you need from me? She asked. Daniel met her gaze. Your voice, he said. Mwajuma froze. My voice. Daniel nodded. Yes, he said. The evidence is strong, but without you, they will twist it, deny it, discredit it. Mwajuma looked down, at Baraka, at her hands, at everything she had already risked. If I speak, she said slowly, there's no going back. Daniel didn't soften the truth. No, he said, there isn't. Silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was a decision forming, slowly, painfully, but clearly. Mwajuma took a breath, then another. Then she looked up. I will do it, she said. Her voice was not loud, but it was steady. Daniel nodded once. That was enough. Outside the day had begun. The city moved, unaware, unchanged. But beneath the surface, things were shifting. Because now it was no longer just about survival. It was about exposure, and once truth begins to rise, it does not stop easily. Mwajuma looked at Baraka one more time, then back at Daniel. When she asked, Daniel's answer came without hesitation. Today. And with that, everything moved forward, toward a moment none of them could undo. The decision to move that same day changed everything. There would be no slow preparation, no careful build-up, no time for the people responsible to erase records, silence witnesses, or reshape the narrative. Daniel understood the risk. So did Mwajuma. But waiting any longer would only strengthen those who had already proven how far they were willing to go. By midday, arrangements were in motion, not publicly announced. Not yet, but quietly, assembled with precision. Daniel had contacted 3 groups simultaneously, his legal team, an independent labor oversight body, and a senior police investigator. He trusted enough to move without delay. No single channel, no single point of failure. If one collapsed, the others would still hold. Mwajuma sat in the back of the vehicle again, this time with Baraka beside her. His hand remained in hers, small and warm, grounding her in a way nothing else could. She had insisted on bringing him. At first, Daniel resisted, but she had been clear. I will not stand there alone, she said, and I will not hide him like something they can control. In the end, he agreed, not because it was safer, but because it was right. The store looked exactly the same when they arrived. Bright, clean, busy. Customers moved through the entrance without hesitation, unaware that something far more serious than shopping was about to unfold behind the scenes. Daniel stepped out first. This time there was no disguise, no attempt to blend in. He walked through the front entrance as himself, and immediately the shift was visible. Employees straightened. Whispers began. The air changed. Mwajuma followed a few steps behind Baraka, at her side. Some people recognized her. Most didn't know what to do. The woman who had been accused just a day before. Now walking in, beside the CEO, confusion spread quickly. Inside the administrative area, the atmosphere tightened even further. Madame Njeri Wambwe stood near her office, speaking with 2 supervisors when she saw them approach. For a brief moment her composure slipped, only slightly, but enough. Then it returned, controlled, measured. Mr. Adeyemi, she said smoothly, stepping forward. This is unexpected. Daniel didn't slow his pace. That seems to be a pattern here, he replied. Njeri's eyes flickered briefly toward Mwajuma, then back to Daniel. If there is something you wish to discuss, she said, we can do so privately. No, Daniel said. His voice was calm, but firm. We'll do it here. Within minutes the room filled. Supervisors, staff, security, and then Samuel Okonkwo. He entered with his usual composed presence, though his eyes moved quickly, assessing the situation with sharp precision. "Daniel," he said, his tone neutral but alert. "What's going on?" Daniel turned to face him. "You're about to find out," he said. The legal team arrived next, then the labor officers, then the police. Not aggressively, not loudly, but undeniably present. And suddenly, this was no longer internal. This was official. Mwajuma stood slightly behind Daniel at first, her body tense, her breathing controlled but shallow. Baraka stayed close to her side, his fingers wrapped tightly around her hand. She could feel his fear. But she also felt something else, his trust, and that gave her strength. Daniel stepped forward. "We're going to address several issues," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Employee deductions, external contracts, compensation fraud, and coercion." Each word landed with weight. The room remained silent, but the tension, it grew. Jerry spoke first. "This is highly irregular," she said. "If there are concerns, they should be reviewed internally." They were. Daniel interrupted. "And they were hidden." Njeri's expression tightened slightly. "You're making serious accusations," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes," he replied. "And I brought serious evidence." He placed the documents on the table, one by one. Carefully. Not rushed, not dramatic. Just undeniable. "Employee welfare deductions," he said. "Transferred externally. Maintenance contracts," he continued. "Approved but never executed. Compensation records," he added. "Filed but never processed." The labor officers stepped forward, reviewing quickly. Their expressions changed, subtly but clearly. Samuel stepped in. "This doesn't prove intent," he said. "There could be administrative errors." Daniel looked at him directly. "For years," he asked. Samuel didn't answer immediately. "Then we would need a full audit," he said. "You're getting one," Daniel replied. Then Mwajuma stepped forward. It wasn't planned, not exactly. But it happened, because something inside her would not stay silent anymore. Her voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried. "My husband died," she said. The room stilled, completely. "I was told there would be compensation," she continued. "There was paperwork, signatures, records." She looked at the documents on the table. "They exist," she said, "but I never received anything." Her hands trembled slightly, but she didn't stop. Instead, she continued. "My salary was reduced. I was forced to borrow money, and when I asked questions," she looked up, directly at Njeri, "I was punished." The silence that followed was different, heavier, because now it was no longer numbers. It was human. Daniel didn't interrupt. He let her speak, because this was what mattered. "They told me to sign a confession," Mwajuma said, "to say I stole, so they could close everything." Her voice shook slightly, but she continued. "And when I refused," she glanced at Baraka, then back at the room. "They threatened my son." That was the moment everything shifted, completely. The police officer stepped forward. "Is that true?" he asked, his voice sharp now. Jerry didn't respond immediately. Samuel spoke instead. "These are serious claims without verification." "They are verified," Daniel said, and then he played the recording. The room filled with the sound of Njeri's voice. Calm, controlled, threatening. "If she talks again, silence her." Then another. 3 days. And another. "The child is part of the situation." No one spoke, because there was nothing left to say. The officers moved quickly after that, not chaotic, but decisive. Njeri was asked to step forward, then escorted aside. Samuel protested, briefly. But when the financial records were matched with his authorizations, he stopped. Mwajuma stood still, watching, not moving, not speaking. Because for the first time she wasn't being pushed, she wasn't being silenced, she wasn't being ignored, she was being heard. Baraka squeezed her hand. "Mama," he whispered. Mwajuma looked down at him, then back at the room, at everything that had just happened. And for the first time in a long time, her breath came freely. Not because everything was fixed, but because the truth had finally been seen. And once seen, it could not be buried again. The noise did not come all at once. It built slowly. At first it was only whispers, quiet conversations between staff, confused glances, questions that had no immediate answers. Then came the movement officers guiding Jerry away, Samuel being escorted out under firm supervision, legal teams stepping in, voices rising, phones being pulled out, messages spreading. The illusion of order, the one that had hidden everything, began to crack. And once it cracked, it did not hold. Mwajuma stood in the middle of it all, but for a moment it felt like she was outside of it, watching, breathing, trying to understand that it was real, that the same place that had crushed her, silenced her, humiliated her, was now the place where everything was being exposed. Her hands were no longer shaking. Her shoulders, though still tense, were no longer weighed down in the same way. Baraka stood beside her, closer than ever, his fingers still wrapped around hers. He looked around with wide eyes, not fully understanding, but sensing the shift. "Mama, are we safe now?" he asked softly. Mwajuma looked down at him. The question lingered, because safety was not something she had trusted for a long time. But this moment was different. "Yes," she said quietly. "Now, we are." Daniel remained focused, even as the situation unfolded. For him, this was not the end. It was the beginning of accountability. He moved between the legal team and the labor officers, ensuring that nothing slipped, nothing was dismissed, nothing was minimized. Every document was logged, every statement recorded, every connection secured, because he knew exposure without structure would fade, and he would not allow that. By late afternoon, the store had been partially closed. Customers were escorted out. Staff were asked to remain for questioning. The building that had once hidden everything was now filled with scrutiny. And, for the first time, transparency. Mwajuma sat in a quiet office away from the main floor. Baraka rested beside her, leaning gently against her arm. He was tired, exhausted from fear, confusion, and everything he had experienced in the past days. Mwajuma placed her hand on his head, her fingers moving softly through his hair. A simple gesture, but one she had feared she might not be able to do again. The door opened quietly. Daniel stepped in. He paused for a moment, observing them, then spoke. "It's done," he said. Mwajuma looked up. Her eyes searched his. "Done," she repeated. Daniel nodded. For today, he clarified. "They've been taken in. The investigation is now official. It won't disappear." Mwajuma let out a slow breath. Not relief, not fully, but something close to it. "And the others?" she asked. "The workers." Daniel stepped closer. "We're setting up immediate support," he said. "Back pay reviews, legal assistance, medical claims." Mwajuma listened, carefully. "And my husband's case?" she asked quietly. Daniel didn't hesitate. "It's being reopened," he said, with full authority. Mwajuma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they felt different. Not helpless, not broken, just human. A few days later, everything looked different. Not perfect, but different. The store remained under investigation, its operations suspended until further review. News had spread, not just locally, but across multiple channels. The story had reached places Mwajuma had never imagined, not because she had spoken loudly, but because the truth had finally been allowed to stand. Mwajuma no longer returned to the cleaning corridors. Instead, she found herself in a different space, a temporary office set up for worker support. It felt strange at first, unfamiliar, but also respectful. She wasn't there as someone being managed. She was there as someone being heard. Daniel had offered her a permanent position in the company's employee welfare division, not as charity, not as rescue, but as recognition. Because what she had done, what she had endured, had changed something that needed to change. Mwajuma had not accepted immediately. She had taken time, because for once in her life, she was allowed to choose. Baraka's treatment began the following week. A proper hospital, qualified specialists, care that Mwajuma had once believed was impossible. The process would take time. Healing always did. But for the first time, there was a path forward. One afternoon, Mwajuma stood by a quiet gravesite. The air was still, the sky open. She hadn't been there in a long time. Not because she didn't want to come, but because coming had always meant facing everything she had lost. Now, it felt different. She knelt slowly, placing a small bouquet beside the simple stone. "Juma," she said softly. Her voice didn't break. It didn't need to. "I kept going," she continued, "even when I didn't know how." She looked down, her fingers tracing the edge of the stone. "They tried to take everything," she said, "but they didn't take us." A small smile touched her lips. "Baraka is strong," she added, "just like you." The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying her words, holding them, letting them exist without fear. Later that evening, Mwajuma walked home with Baraka beside her. Not the same home, not the same life, but still, her life. Baraka looked up at her. "Mama," he said. "Yes, will things be hard again?" Mwajuma paused. She didn't lie. Sometimes she said. Baraka nodded, then smiled slightly. "That's okay," he said. "We're strong." Mwajuma looked at him. Really looked, and for the first time in a long time, she believed it. Because strength wasn't what had saved them. Not alone. It was truth. It was courage. It was the refusal to disappear when everything tried to erase them. And now, for the first time, they were no longer invisible. In many parts of the world, people believe that poverty is only about money. But stories like Mwajuma's reveal something deeper. The real danger is not just having nothing, it is being placed inside a system where your suffering is ignored, your voice is silenced, and your existence becomes easy to erase. Mwajuma did not start her journey as a fighter. She was simply a mother trying to survive, trying to protect her child, trying to hold on to dignity in a world that kept taking from her. But when everything was pushed to the edge, when silence meant losing everything, she chose to speak. And that choice changed everything. This story reminds us that justice does not always come quickly. It does not always come easily. But it begins the moment someone refuses to accept what is wrong as normal. If Mwajuma had stayed silent, nothing would have changed. But because she held on to the truth, even when it was dangerous, light found its way into a place built on darkness. So wherever you are watching from today, take a moment to reflect. Have you ever seen something unfair and stayed silent? Have you ever felt too small to make a difference? You are not alone. And sometimes change begins with one voice that refuses to disappear. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. And if you believe in stories that reveal truth, bring hope, and inspire courage, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because there are many more voices waiting to be heard.